Please come to the stage. Windy, COO of AwanTunai. The stage is yours.
Hi everyone, selamat malam gitu ya. So I'd like to speak a little bit about eFounders. I think Aswin kind of put me on the spot, but okay. The previous, yeah, sure, come on. So basically, Melina and Sam, I think did a great job of explaining in the beginning. Cuman, basically, this is the Alibaba head office in Guangzhou. So if you see that kayak doll over there, it's actually Taobao doll, and they have a very interesting concept. Jadi tuh orang-orang yang employees-nya Taobao, when they first join Taobao, they have to do a headstand. Jadi kayak so we actually tried it. I think we both kind of failed on it. So you actually have it against the wall and you do a headstand. And what does that like tell or embodies? Basically, what it means is that you have to see the problem from a completely different side. Jadi kayak when we first joined on this program, eFounders, we were super surprised on how important it was for Alibaba to have culture. Dan itu nggak hanya satu bagian aja ya, jadi nggak hanya satu kartu, but you see a lot of like different tai chi, you see a lot of different kayak dolls of Alibaba gitu kan. So it was a very interesting like 2 weeks. So we spent 2 weeks in Guangzhou and then also to Yiwu, and we talked with the business leaders there. Maybe you want to talk a little bit about our experience there.
Sure. So it's a 2 weeks experience, intensive discussion with some of the leaders of Alibaba. So for some of you that may not be aware, we have gigantic ecosystem in China, Alibaba Tencent. The Alibaba business consists of C2C, B2B, and so many others like they even have Alibaba Pictures, they have Alipay and whatnot. So we actually met a lot of these business leaders that had the Alibaba businesses. We actually visited the warehouse, we visited some of the facilities, and to me personally, the most rewarding were twofold. One is I get to meet some of the early employees of Alibaba, can get to ask them questions about how Alibaba started and how they put the foundation very early on to become what it is now. And of course, initial of it is when we actually got visited by Jack Ma. We were being very secretive about it. They didn't want to promise anything, but suddenly Jack Ma disappeared. And that was 1 hour conversation with him, and we asked him lots of questions. All of the eFounders fellows was founders, so we are very interested about foundership and also some of the issues about entrepreneurship, and we managed to ask those questions. We can share some of this.
So it was just to recap, it was quite intense
11 days.
Yeah, 11 days. So okay, jadi I want to share a little bit. Jadi kan one of the things that we as the founders, I think one of the reasons that we were also kind of like selected. So for the Alibaba eFounders program is that because we want to give back. Jadi let's start with a bit of a give back gitu ya. Jadi pas yang pertama kali datang, so when we first came there, the first classroom was actually given by the VP of Finance in Alibaba. And of course we were like, oh, maybe they're gonna tell us about, being a startup, you have to really make sure that your profit and loss statements are really good, or like, okay, your financials have to be good. But it was really surprising that the VP of Finance talked about culture. And it was 2 hours, and he was so into it, and it was really weird because who would have thought finance, right? You would have thought people and culture or HR. It was the VP of Finance, and basically what he mentioned or what he said was that the lesson of Alibaba is actually the strategy of behind Alibaba is the culture. And we were like, really? Coming from you? And basically what he says, okay, you know what? The number one distinctive thing that you cannot change in the company is your culture. And he went on to actually tell about this story. Jadi, so apparently, this is, you can see Jack Ma there. This is when it was SARS, yeah. Jadi I think in 2001, there was a huge virus. I know Aswin is trying to remember the exact date, I can't remember. So in SARS, it was like a really huge virus, and everybody, in China, was actually sent home. So every store, every business, they weren't operating. But that was actually the moment that Taobao was really taking off. So when SARS happened, a disaster for China, obviously, it was the moment that Alibaba, Taobao, really came to life. And we were a bit confused, why was this the case? Because it turns out that they had this culture of customer first. And when that happened, the customer center, the customer call people, were actually working in their houses, were actually working in their laptops, and actually getting the other family members to help. Jadi what Randy, who is the VP of Finance, said, we actually saw very weird numbers. Why are suddenly our sales going up? Why are suddenly our customer service calls take such, are able to actually accept many more people? And this resulted in actually Taobao gaining over eBay, right? I think at that time, because Taobao was actually very small. So imagine right now, back then, eBay was the largest e-commerce ever in I think the world. Then they went to China. But then you know what? See, and everyone was looking at Jack and saying, okay, you know what? You're just gonna fail because eBay has much more technology. They're pretty much more experienced in the market. But looking at this story and looking at how they actually managed to increase their sales and actually launch Taobao during the moment of SARS showed that you can't replicate that. You can't plan for SARS to happen. And you can't plan that your employees are just going to come home and work, right? And that thing did not happen in the competition. It did not happen in eBay. It did not happen in their smaller competition. But people still needed to buy something, right? Because if you're sick and you can't go out, so obviously this was when they launched. Next, so we took a bit of a step back and we really thought about that, and we think, okay, you know what, we really cannot have replicated that. And so basically what I mentioned, through a culture of customers first, they turned a disaster into an opportunity. And the key lessons that learned, right, was that number one, it was really huge customer trust. Earning the customer's trust, because what it did then, right, it actually made them very focused in terms of where they're going to take Taobao. Jadi kalau I remember in the very first, when I say Taobao, they have this doll, and then you have to actually do a headstand, because that was the culture that happened when the SARS happened. They look at a different angle, a different perspective of SARS, right? And they look at it as an opportunity, and they look at it as a way to actually serve their customers, because they know that their customers are at home, they can't go out, and they're suffering. So this was one of the things that I think clicked to me very much, that culture is not some values, right? Culture is not some words, but culture is what you do even when no one is looking, or when no one is actually expecting you to do that. And in here, we can see an example of how culture basically propels the business forward. So that was, I think, my lesson.
Great. So I think it's also my turn to share a bit about what we learned from this Alibaba visit. I'd like to talk a little bit about the role of the entrepreneur, right? So the culture was basically there, and it got started by somebody. The starter was the entrepreneur, and the entrepreneur in this case is Jack Ma. So there is this famous saying that Jack always says, today is difficult, tomorrow is much more difficult, but the day after tomorrow is beautiful. And there is a caveat that most people die tomorrow night. So Alibaba people, the Ali people, has to survive tomorrow's winter. So we will make it, right? So Jack Ma himself has been an amazing entrepreneur and very inspirational leader. You can see a lot of his quotes being cited again and again as as very philosophical and very strong in setting up the culture. But if I have to break it down, what does it take to be as an entrepreneur to set such a strong culture? I have to say that there are 3 roles that he assumed. The first is that he sets the vision. He knows, he has absolute certainty, even belief in himself, that about what tomorrow will look like. Doesn't matter whether he will do it, doesn't matter someone else will do it, but that will be the vision for tomorrow, right? The second is he is a relentless guardian of the culture. So maintaining a culture is very, very difficult because it's all about understanding behaviors, what's right, what's wrong, and Jack, I can talk more about that, right? The last piece is he's an amazing performer, and this goes back to the background of Jack Ma. So let's go through that one by one. If there is actually a video that Erika will use, and we'll probably get back to that, but. As a visionary, when Jack Ma first learned about the internet in the US before he started Alibaba, and he knows the moment he got exposure to the internet, he knows that China will be touched by internet at some point. He knows that China is doing global trade, but in a very manual way, and one day the internet will enable that global trade and will revolutionize even the domestic economy in China. Okay. There was also a famous saying that says, even if we are not lucky enough to do this, to make it happen, we will contribute to the progress for someone else to make it happen. So he didn't even care whether he will make it happen. All he cares is he will contribute to the progress. And that's, I think, the mentality that I took to take whatever that we do here into the digital era, right? So that's the visionary bit where he has no doubt, he can paint the vision eloquently. He can use his words to really convince people, especially back in 2001 when China was still a closed country. People had no idea what he's talking about, what is internet, and he kept going and going and going. Just painting that picture, beautiful picture, right? Okay. As a guardian, it's very interesting to learn that Jack Ma and a lot of his co-founders are ex-teachers. So they normally teach in university somewhere, teaching English. So they are actually, what I found is that they are very, very people focused. They know how to develop people, especially Jack, and he can determine, he can notice patterns of behaviors. I think that's very, very important. To build a culture is something soft, you cannot touch, right? But you can only observe, and you have to understand the interaction between one person to the next in a cultural setting, and say, okay, this is right, this is wrong. And that, I think, what he has done very, very well. And when we actually met him, somebody asked about whether he's aware about a company that Alibaba just acquired. And
he was for, I think, $10 billion, right?
No, less than that, right? So he said that anything below $10 billion, 10 billion RMB, which is about 3 billion USD, you got to talk to Alibaba CEO, because I don't check that anymore. What I do is culture. So you can see how passionate he is about people, and how he sees his role as the cultural guardian of Alibaba. There are 60,000 people now, I run a company for 100, and that's a lot of work really. Trying to grow that imagine to 60,000 and really maintaining that cultural consistency that Winnie was talking about is not an easy task. So that's what he did really well as a guardian. Now, as a performer, I have to say that in painting the vision and making sure that people are convinced about the future and having the same belief, I noticed that Jack is a master of his own emotion. He can project that complete confidence. I'm sure he's an entrepreneur, right? I'm sure there are times when things goes really tough and he got so frustrated and he thought, okay, am I gonna die? But it doesn't come across that way. And when we actually met him, you can see how much he say believe and how convincing he is. And when we trace about his history, he's actually a son of a performer. So I'm sure he learned quite a bit from his parents. So mastery of emotion, I actually asked one of the early employees of Alibaba, where does Jack Ma's energy come from? It's Tai Chi. So he can regulate his own emotion and use that Tai Chi to kind of be a source of his energy. That's very important, and that's something that I try to practice as an entrepreneur. Yeah, so visionary, guardian, and performer.